Right, okay, let's restart, and Will, we're recording this lesson for you because we care. We were looking at this function called getInteger. Are there any questions about that so far?
That once value equals integer input, that is a very long line.
All right, okay. Let's have a look at this. This is the line that is actually getting the input from the user, which is this bit. This is the prompt inside here, and it is the concatenation, the gluing together of this string, input a value between, the string min value, so if that's 1, that will be the string 1, and the string and, with spaces around it, and the string max value. So that will say input a value between 1 and 10. The reason why it's 1 and 10 is because I send 1 in as an argument into this parameter and 10 into an argument into this parameter later in the code. Okay? So that's that. Any other questions? Can you see why is it that this here is in a sense superfluous, but also in a sense important? What did I say about that?
Which one, sir?
This line 10.
Line 10?
Yeah, line 10. What did I say right just before the break?
It can't be a real number. It can't be a value that works. It has to be a value that doesn't work.
Essentially, that's true. But even if I take that out, it will still work, this algorithm, right? The reason being is this is forcing, this valid equals false, is forcing this to be true, this predicate here, while true, because not valid is not false, and not false is true, while true, and then it will do this anyway, and it will set the value of value, definitely. Okay? Because we're forcing that while loop at least once. But the PyCharm environment is not quite intelligent enough. It's not running the code. It's not intelligent enough to realize that this will definitely go inside here, and therefore will definitely set the value. So it's saying, notice that this is highlighted in yellow, this value, return value. And if I put my mouse over it, it says local variable value might be referenced before assignment. In other words, it's not clever enough to know that this actually line will definitely execute by virtue of this valid equals false. And so it's telling the programmer nicely that, it needs to be assigned before we're referencing it. Yeah? No, sorry, I'm not close. Okay, so it's basically saying you haven't assigned a value to it, potentially. So why can you read its value if I've never declared it? And therefore I'm going to declare it back in this line up here. It is superfluous in terms of the algorithm, as I said, simply because I know that this line 12 will definitely happen, but it's not clever enough to realize. Okay, now my next question is, if I run this, let's run it again. If I run this and put 98, it's going to ask me again, which is its intention. What happens if I type something in that isn't an integer, though? Will it crash or not? Will this getInteger loop cater for the fact that it... Will it crash or not if I type in Fred or cat? Yes. What line is making it crash?
Value equals integer?
Perfect, yes. Because what I type in, Fred, on line 12, is not going to be a string. It will be a string that isn't representing an integer, and therefore I cannot cast it as an integer. It will crash at that point.
Can you go back to the beginning? I just want to get this all down.
Sorry?
Can you go back to the beginning? I just want to be able to get this all down.
You can, I'm going to put it on OneNote for you, so you can just copy and paste it. Okay? So there is a problem there. Yeah. So if I type in cat or whatever, it will crash. And notice it does. It says here value equals int. Invalid literal for integer with base 10, CT. This thing that I typed in here, CT, isn't an integer. Okay? And it tells me, and it is on line 12. No, this is a class. Sorry, can't come in. I'm going to have to put a sign on the door that says, if class is in progress, please do not enter. Right. So how do we get around that? Does anyone know? I don't expect you to know.
You can put the when you get around to minister for the or
Yeah, I do not want this to crash. If I type in a non-integer value into my input,
then you put a while true.
I can't because it's still, whatever happens, even a while true,
Yes.
this line will still crash.
Yes, you can put a while true, take the int out, and then have an if statement.
And then what's my if statement do? How do I determine whether it's an integer or not?
I'm not sure, but I think there's a way because I did.
There is a way, and that's why the question I'm asking.
Yes. Then if it's an integer, you would break the loop, or else you would.
Yeah, well, let me tell you the easiest way. The easiest way is with something called try except blocks. Okay, try except blocks. And basically, try except. Try is code that you should try out. Except is what happens if an exception takes place. It takes exception. And you will see that these things is actually called an exception. This value error is called an exception. And Python itself takes exception to this request on line 12 to convert a non-integer string into an integer. So what we can do instead here is we can say the following. We can say try colon. Okay. And if there's an exception, we can say print this is not a valid integer in the range. Okay, so we try this code. This is the piece of code that's going to go wrong, if anything. If something does go wrong, it runs this exception. And notice that valid is now going to determine this value. But value won't have been set. Won't have been set. Do you see what I mean? Because this couldn't do it. So what else do I need in there? I actually need to set what the value is. What value will I set? What will I make value be? In here. Bearing in mind that we've determined that it's not a valid entry, and therefore we want to make the value to be, it's invalid, not in range. So give me a valid not in range number, something outside of the range. Min value minus 1. Okay? Understand? Of course, I could put max value plus 1, or max value plus 10, or min value minus 12. Doesn't matter. So this here would be set the value as not in range. Okay, so we try this code. If something goes wrong in the conversion of this string into an integer, it sets the value to something that's no longer in range. This will therefore be true or false valid after that. If this exception gets done, executed, value will be min value minus 1, and therefore this will be false. Yeah, because it's less than min value, and therefore the value will be false, and then it will go around the loop again. No, not now, because I'm in the class. Thank you. Any questions?
It's quite confusing.
Yeah, but you get used to it. Okay, it's one of these things. Like if we were learning Japanese, and I spurted out a whole pile of Japanese, you go, that's really good, I don't understand, because it's the first time you've heard it. So then we dissect it, we repeat it over and over again until you get used to it. Okay. And because this is being recorded, you can always listen to it back again if you want.
It's been recorded.
I'm recording.
Yes, alright.
We're recording it, Will. You're smiling now. Stop smiling. Okay. Any questions? Does anyone want me to repeat anything there? I'm quite happy to. Remember, the goal of this function is to return an integer between min value and max value that we know is an integer and we know it's between those two values. Okay?
Could you please explain one more time why you wrote value equals min value?
How I'm getting it between min value and max value?
No, but line 10.
Line
Why is it
10.
important?
Well, if I take this out, it is saying that this value has not been assigned. Okay?
No.
It's not been assigned if that's not there. And I can return value without having been assigned, because this inside here is a little bit hidden to PyCharm. That's Python takes care of that. PyCharm doesn't know that this code inside here will definitely execute and therefore value will definitely be set. It doesn't know that.
Okay, so it will give an error.
So it seems to think that value doesn't have a value. Okay, just to illustrate that point even further, if I created another sort of temporary function, this has got an unresolved reference. It doesn't even know what it is. So it's a slightly different problem. Return y. It goes, I don't know what y is. What's y?
It's unresolved.
It's unresolved. Doesn't know what it is. Okay? But here, I'm saying if x is less than 8, then set y to be 7. But what happens if x wasn't less than 8? Y would never be set. And therefore, if I return y, it hasn't been assigned. And it's telling us that there's a potential issue there. So if I send in a 10 to that, 10, if x is 10 less than 8, no, return y. Doesn't know what y is. Okay, it hasn't been defined. You see? That's a much simpler version of what we were talking about above. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right, let me, hopefully, let's just try this out now. Let's just run it and then I'll copy it over into OneNote and you can play with it for a bit. So here I should be able to type cat. This is not a valid integer in the range. This is not within the range, try again. Okay? Yeah, minus.
What's the 2? Why is that this has got?
Because I've got two messages. One here, in this exception, and one here. I can sort that out by putting this because let's say I type in cat, okay? So go up here, I type in cat into this, value won't be assigned, it will come into here, into the exception, and it will print this message out. Then it will go to value will be set to be 0, if it's between 1 and 10, this will be 1 minus 1, which is 0. So value will be 0, and then it will still do this. Valid is false, because 0 is not between 1 and 10. If it's not valid, which it isn't, it will do this. So you're getting both messages coming out. You see? The way around that would be not to print that and let this deal with it. Okay, so you could take this print message out altogether and extend this to say this is not within the range or is invalid. Okay, then we're only going to get one message. So if I type cat, it's going to give me not within range or invalid. If I type 67, it should be between 1 and 10, it's not within range or invalid. Okay, we'll get one message instead. Right, let me copy that over to OneNote. So, copy. And I'm going to put that in programming, and I'm going to create a new page called try accept and validation, or data validation. Okay, we're going to copy that over and have a play with it. Check it out and see what you think.
Sir, I found the other way.
Yeah, the other way would be just to say, yeah, you would say, if not int blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I think you need to know about try accept blocks anyway.
Yes, because this one works on real numbers. This will only- but this one is-
And by the way, I should have put more comments in my code. I'll go and do that now. Actually, can I show you this? Because this is really useful. In fact, you should do this for your hall when you're doing code for hall. If I've got a function, can I show you this? If I've got a function, I'm just going to click the function name, and a little light bulb appears. I'm going to click the light bulb and say insert documentation string stub. And if I do that, this is where I explain what my function does, okay, as a comment. Prints out the elements in a list separated by a separator, and the parameter is a list, and then I explain the list to print. Okay, so these are just comments, and it can automatically create documentation for all your code. Okay, so for this one, get integer, click get integer, light bulb, insert documentation string stub, requests and returns an integer which is valid and in the range min value less than or equal to max value. Min value is the smallest possible value that a user can type. Max value, the largest possible value that a user can type. Return the value entered. Okay, so try and do that with your hall. When you create your subroutines from now on, try and add this documentation string stuff. Reason being, when it comes to your projects, do it as you go along. it will save you. You're going to be writing so much code. By the time you get to write it up, you'll go, oh, what does that bit of code do again? You won't need to do that. It's really put a comment to it. Okay. So this one, insert documentation string stub. This adds name or appends name to name list. And okay, I've added those comments now into OneNote as well. Okay, so you get those nice comments in there. Right, Will, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to get the boys to do some exercises. Bye. Say bye.
Bye.